Well, greetings and welcome to the Dividing Line. Back here in Phoenix, Arizona, actually using a camera. I don't really think we need to do that, but Rich is sold out to it. We've spent all this money on cameras, so I guess we're going to use them. And yes, wearing one of my cat shirts later on, we will... Well, you know what? I was going to do that sort of in between topics, but we'll go ahead and start off with the light stuff. And because we've got some serious topics to get to today, and it'll be pretty heavy. So we'll start with something enjoyable. I was sent a link to this. I didn't immediately promote it because it was a bad day. It was the day that the announcement was made of Voddie Baucham's death, so it didn't seem appropriate. But I did go on to YouTube and comment on the video, said it was awesome. I really have to wonder, was this AI done? Who's singing this? A friend of mine who, he's getting up there in years. We have to sort of keep an eye on him. Getting ready to file for the silver alerts when he drives off someplace and gets lost, type of a guy. And he was insisting that this was John Cooper. I'm like, not even close. No. But yeah, when I first started watching this, I'm like, what is this? It starts off so serious and everything. It's done by Reformed and Dangerous. And it's 3 minutes and 46 seconds long. But this shirt actually ends up in it, so that gives you some idea. But yeah, so here's our. It's not going to be our new theme song. It doesn't really work that way. We could find some use for it somewhere along the line. Maybe in a funny debate in the future or something. Haven't had too many funny debates actually, but so. Yeah, here, I think it's called Predestined Threads or something like that, but here we go. Wait. All right. I was having to listen to it on this side because somebody else was doing something with sound on the other side, so we messed all that up. So we're going to have to start this all over again, and there we go.
You stood your ground in the fiercest debate, defending the truth at the narrow gate, against Roman's claim and false prophets' word. You've defended the scriptures like few others could. Your logic stands. Just proclaim the truth will triumph in Jesus' name. Cats with lasers, planes pierce the air, even Armenians stop and stare. Not by chance, not stitched in vain. Predestined thread.
again, super well done. I would like to know, is that a real person singing? Is that, who knows anymore? I would assume it was, but I could be wrong. I love that last little scene there with the little kitten with the James White shirt on. That's pretty cute. As Rich knows, I could show you a video of what it's like in my house at cat feeding time, but I think that would scare him even more than it did the first time he saw it. So anyways, no, in answer to the cosmic question, honestly, once you buy one thing on Facebook, it seems to know and just keeps throwing those ads at you. I think a lot of them were something called Gecko Custom, I think that's where I had the shirts with my kitties made on them. And I'll have to tell you, I'm really sad. One of those shirts, little guy isn't with us anymore. He disappeared a couple days into my last trip, and he's gone. And sad about that. Very, very sad about that. But anyway, Gecko Custom, you can upload pictures of your cats or dogs, or I suppose Squirrel could upload pictures of his squirrels, chipmunks, whatever. And they do a really good job with them. They're fairly quick. And then there's a Hoo, H-O-O. I think that's where this one came from. But just be prepared. It's going to be 2.5, 3 months. It comes over on a slow boat from China. But they've got, like I said, this one's rather striking. And everywhere I go, I get comments. And it's not, boy, you're stupid. It's like, oh, I love the shirt. So, yes, sir. You pulled the microphone up.
I was just going to say, this is information that we really don't need getting around to the masses.
I don't really care.
You know, it's just not
the slightest. Yeah, not the slightest. Yeah. I don't really care. So I'm just answering the cosmic question. I mean, somebody who puts that amount of effort into asking the question, where do you buy those shirts? Who? And Gecko Custom, pretty much. Now, of course, they were also doing all sorts of my Kujis, which I've been collecting for decades. And half of my Kujis, the sweaters, aren't actually Kujis. I've mentioned this before. They're Tundras. Tundra's a Canadian thing. I don't really buy any Kujis anymore because Kujis they abandoned making them in Australia, and they make them in China. So it's like, never mind. I think the Tundras are still made in Canada, so that's better than nothing. But anyways, yes, I've always liked colorful stuff since I've first understood what colors were. So there you go. If you all just want to wear, plain old, if you want to look like Rich, go ahead. That's, yeah, okay. So there's our lighthearted stuff for the day. Two major topics, really important topics that we need to address. And when I say we, I mean Alpha and Omega Ministries. This is what we do. These are the topics we've been addressing for probably the two of them together longer than any other apologetics ministry in the United States, or in the world for that matter. We've been doing this for 40 some odd years. Mormonism was the very first topic we were addressing. And Roman Catholicism came along fairly quickly after that. And I honestly don't know of anyone who's done more debates with Roman Catholic apologists than I have. So these are topics that are right down our alley, and all of a sudden they're all around us. Let's start with the Roman Catholic subject. All right. This has to be addressed carefully, I think. I thought I had put this into another window so I could play it over here. Yes, I did. Okay, there it is. I saw this posted, I believe 5 Solas. Yes, 5 Solas posted it. Thank you, 5 Solas. And The comment from Five Solas is, yes, they're pushing for ecumenism, evangelicals and Catholics together is the perfect example of the type of thing I've been talking about. It was a document proposing the process Roman Catholics should unite on religious freedom and morality. The only problem is it crossed the line and said we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and the differences we have are secondary. That's exactly what is happening today. This document was criticized by both MacArthur and Sproul. It happened in 1994. I don't know how old Five Solas is, but we were a part of this. Alpha Omega existed then. 94, I had already been engaging Roman Catholics, had done a number of debates with Roman Catholics by that time. We started in August of 90. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably getting up 10, 11, 12 debates in 94. And so we did a lot of discussion on this. I think if we somehow went back in the archives, which I think we are scanning our old newsletters and stuff like that, so we'll eventually have those. But I remember specifically writing articles on ECT. If we did programs that, because the dividing line was off and on during that time period, depending on finances and things like that. We discussed it, and we had to discuss it because Charles Colson was the one that was pushing ECT. And then when there was a major confab to respond to it, who were the people that responded to it? Was R.C. Sproul, John MacArthur, and D. James Kennedy. And look, today, outside of Reformed circles, R.C.'s been gone a while. John just died a matter of weeks ago. D. James Kennedy had a massive heart attack, I believe, around 2007, 2006, 2007. The reason I say that is I got to go on a cruise around the Hawaiian Islands with my wife for our 25th wedding anniversary. And the reason I got to go was I was one of two people that replaced D. James Kennedy on the Coral Ridge cruise. The other person was R.C. Sproul. And so I just go 25 years when you were married and sort of do that's how you do math when you're old. It's like, okay, my anniversary was when? What? Anyway, so the big guys that had responded to this stuff aren't around to respond to it now. But those of you who listen to this program know I've been talking about this from the start and have said we should be watching for this very kind of thing. I didn't expect it necessarily to come in this way. And what I mean is, well, you know what? Let me talk about that in just a second. Let's listen to Eric Mataxas here. I don't know why Eric Mataxas decided to strawman the response to ECT, but it is. And I'm here to correct it. Like I said, I was a part of this. I'm one of the guys that's still fighting this battle and have been consistently all that time. So, let's listen to what's said here. I think it's important to understand that this movement has received a major charge of energy over the past 2 weeks. So let's listen to it.
He used to work for Chuck Colson. He was.
Oh, by the way, this is going to freak you out. And Five Solas said it's his software stuff. Maybe Rich can help him with this. But he said that whenever he grabs a video something, there is a audio video disconnect. And so it'll probably drive Rich crazy and all the rest of you too. But just listen, close your eyes if you have to, whatever.
One of my heroes, and then I had the privilege of getting to know him and working for him. And he started something called Evangelicals and Catholics Together. Mm-hmm. And he took a lot of heat from, you're a Catholic and I'm an evangelical. He took a lot of heat from Reformed Protestants who basically said, no. You can't break bread with those, you know, what? Cultists. It's a satanic cult, and the Pope is the Antichrist. And it's interesting because I think part of when we're talking about working class Americans, we're talking about people of faith who don't live in that rarefied world where they're concerned about the Westminster Confession versus, they just know there are godless bureaucrats who are devotedly secular, who don't understand the founders, don't understand religious liberty, sneer at religious liberty. It's now in scare quotes in the New York Times. And we all need to kind of band together for a common vision of what it is to be a freedom-loving American, as the founders were. They were not enforcing their faith, but they knew that without faith, you can't really have virtue and self-government, that somehow these things have to work together.
Yeah. Well, and they
used to work.
Okay, so, when I was listening there, I just had to sort of chuckle and go, have you ever read the Papal Syllabus of Errors, Eric? Did you know that in the 1800s, the Pope identified religious liberty as a heresy, as an error? Do you know what Roman Catholic integralism is? Are you watching the rise of that terminology amongst Roman Catholics? Maybe not. Maybe you don't know. I don't know, but I just found it sort of funny. The response to evangelicals and Catholics together was gospel focused, as it would have to be. It was not. I'm not going to break bread with those cultists and the Pope's the Antichrist. That was such a straw man. It was so shallow. There was no reason for it. Very damaging to anyone's credibility, because you can still go back. The videos still exist of what the focus that we all had, and that some of us still have, what it was. But this type of attitude, and I'm actually going to play something else from Mataxas, because he also came out and said, if you're talking about Mormonism right now, you're probably not saved. Okay, we'll take a look at that one too. But this attitude is getting turbocharged, and it's getting turbocharged because of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And I want to just play for you here. This isn't that long. I'm not going to take the time to put the video up. I'll just play the audio for this one. But this is Andrew Clovet, executive producer of the Charlie Kirk Show, on with Tucker Carlson and someone else I don't recognize. And Andrew helps us to understand how this ecumenical movement is happening and how it can only go one direction. He talks about his own conversion and basically admits he never had any idea about church history, Reformation, gospel issues, doesn't understand Roman Catholic theology, doesn't understand transubstantiation, doesn't understand the mark on the soul of the priest that allows him to perform the miracle of transubstantiation. He doesn't understand indulgences. He doesn't understand justification by faith. Doesn't understand sola scriptura, papacy, any of this stuff, because honestly, the church he's converted in exists outside the stream of church history, in the sense that many of these evangelical churches, Calvary Chapel type churches, they don't care that the entirety of their theological language came from someplace else. They don't care where it came from. They don't care what traditions formed it, even as Protestants, as non-Catholics, how tradition formed their language. So they don't know. And so when people start talking about stuff they don't know, they're like, why are you all so upset about this stuff? It's like, well, because eventually you got to deal with this. If you're going to have the Lord's Supper, then you need to be able to tell people what it is and what it isn't. And if you're going to have any type of consistent unity in your local body, same thing. Same thing. You got to do the same thing. You have to be able to answer questions. You're going to have people come in, and they're going to come in with different beliefs. And they're going to ask you questions, and you've got to be able to answer and use language that will communicate with them. And honestly, so much of this is based upon the predication that the Reformation was a mistake. It didn't need to happen. It shouldn't have happened. Would have been better if it hadn't happened. And that's becoming a really prevalent perspective, really prevalent way of thinking. And believe me, once you adopt that, there's only one direction for you to go. You're not a Roman Catholic that encounters that. They're not going to be becoming a Protestant. The Protestant's going to be being invited to become a Roman Catholic. It's a one-way street. And that's really what's going on. So here's the conversation. Just listen into it here.
It's moved me to public schools. I ended up getting saved in college. Very, very, very non-denominational evangelical way to phrase it. I got saved in college, radically saved. So I had this Catholic background, but then I found myself in a non-denominational setting alone at a school in Seattle.
Okay, now let me just stop just for a second. I had a Catholic background, but I got radically saved in college outside the Roman Catholic Church. So, was the gospel being preached in the Roman Catholic Church? Are you believing the same gospel that was being preached in the Roman Catholic Church? Doesn't sound like it. It sounds like there's fundamental differences here. But so many people that were, quote unquote, raised Roman Catholic were raised completely nominally, and they don't understand the theology. And of course, today, with the evolution of Rome, if you were raised in the Roman Catholic Church in the 30s and 40s of the last century, which is almost a century ago now, you knew what you believed. You had the Baltimore Catechism, you had stuff like that. You could give answers as to what the Mass is about, foundation of the papacy. You understood these things. That's not the case anymore. Nominal Roman Catholics can be clueless about the key issues of the Reformation, just as nominal Protestants can be clueless of the Reformation as well. So I think that's what we're hearing here.
Like the second least church city in the country.
Right.
And I ended up getting radically saved. And so, but I've never cared about the distinctions. I love both.
Yeah, I agree.
I might have petty, minor little theological differences.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. I love them both. I don't understand. I can't, because of my
Okay, so petty, minor little theological differences. The difference as to whether Christ's singular sacrifice perfects those for whom it's made, or it needs to be repeated over and over again, never affects anybody for whom it's made. That's a petty, minor theological difference. How you have peace with God is a petty, minor, whether the scriptures are sufficient in and of themselves, or you need the papacy, the ever-evolving papacy, Pope Francis, wherever Leo's going to go now, who knows? You need priests. You don't need priests. These are petty. No, these are definitional. You can't even start. You have to have such a bland, watered-down definition of Christianity that you would be, that there would be nothing meaningfully left to say. And see, that's the whole thing about the basic, the mere Christianity movement. You need to believe in the Trinity, though how in the world do you get there if the scriptures aren't sufficient? I have no idea. But need to believe in the Trinity, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and pretty much that's it. You can have every different view of the church, every different view of how you get saved, every different view of priests and sacraments. It's just petty little minor things. No, it's not petty little minor things. And our forefathers understood that, but we don't read them anymore. Do you think that it was probably a Calvary Chapel type thing that he was in? Do you think they had books from the Puritans in the library? If they had a library or the bookstore? No, they've got Chuck Smith stuff. So we don't read them anymore. So we don't know what they found important and why it's important. And if you actually start getting down to applying the Christian faith and asking, how do they actually connect with government, law, morality, everything? You've got to have answers to these questions. And when people start making the gospel itself a petty little thing, it's real easy. You look at the independent fundamentalist Baptists that demand absolute agreement on everything. I mean, down to the jot and tittle. It's real easy to use them and then go, well, anybody that wants clarity and stuff like that, those are those types of people. That's not the case. And the ECT response was very focused, very clear, understood the Roman Catholic position, addressed issues of scriptural sufficiency, errors in the history of the papacy, and really focused upon how does a person have peace with God. And Rome fundamentally answers those questions differently than anyone who follows a biblical gospel that you would read in Romans or Galatians or John or anywhere else in the Testament, for that matter. And so it's this. There are a lot of people that start off with this surface level, I got radically saved. What does that mean? What does that mean? Where did the terminology you're using even come from? What's its background? What do you believe about the supper? I mean, baptism and the supper, they sort of define Christian fellowship, right? So what do you believe about that? Well, you can believe whatever you want. Really? Is that what you read in 1 Corinthians chapter 11? Yeah, whatever you want. Do whatever you want. No, that's not a New Testament understanding at all.
Path here, I never cared.
Anyone who focuses on Jesus is my brother. That's how I feel. And
well, that's wonderful. Isn't that warm and fuzzy? So Jehovah's Witnesses talk about Jesus all the time. So are they your brother? They think Jesus is Michael the Archangel and that he didn't actually rise from the dead because he did not have a spirit to rise from the dead. He was recreated as Michael the Archangel. So we're just cool, right? Focused on Jesus. Maybe there's a reason why the New Testament warns us about false Jesuses. Maybe. How about the Mormons? We're going to be talking about them in a moment. They believe Jesus is Elohim's firstborn spirit child in the pre-existence, where Elohim lived on a planet that circles a star named Kolob. And Elohim was once a man lived on another planet, had been exalted to the status of godhood, brought his wives with him, organized that planet that circles a star named Kolob, and began, in a body of flesh and bones, as his wives always have, to engage in sexual intercourse with them to create the spirits of everyone who's ever going to live on earth. One of the next born of the spirit children of Elohim is Lucifer. Hence, Jesus and Lucifer and us are all spirit brothers. And so, is this the Jesus that we're talking about? As long as they're talking about Jesus, the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, right? Talking about Jesus. How about the Unitarians? Jesus is a moral teacher, a prophet of God, but not God himself. These are questions that have been answered for a long, long time, but since no one cares about church history, most people have the idea that, those people back then, they were just so narrow-minded in comparison to us. Just because they had an attention span that was 57 times longer than we have. That's how people think now. And so we don't have to worry. Why should we care about what, people in the past said? we're modern folks, and so we can get beyond all this stuff.
And I agree with you 100%. And if you let it's a little bit like Twitter, actually. if you think about it too much, you end up hating everybody, and you miss the commonality between people, and the commonality between Christians is Jesus, period.
Again, that sounds so wise, but when you sit back and think about it, it means nothing. The commonality is Jesus. What is the only way for that statement? There's only one way that statement can have any meaning at all, is if we're agreed about who Jesus is. And since the New Testament warns us that there will be those who come and present you a false Jesus, then we need to know how to identify the true Jesus. Or there can be no commonality around Jesus. And, you know, if people are going to be trying to say that, you know, here's the beginning of Christian nationalism, well, okay, then we need to be prepared to answer questions about what this Christian nation believes and how it's going to practice. And guess what? What you believe about Christ, the scriptures, the gospel is absolutely definitional to how you're going to answer those questions. A Roman Catholic is going to answer these questions completely differently. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And you go, well, how can you say that? Because I've been doing this for decades. Go back and listen to the Bible Answer Man broadcast. Timothy Staples, staff apologist, Catholic Answers. What was that, around 2000, somewhere around there, 1999, 2000, 2001, whatever it was we did. Algo will know the date and time and what shirt I was wearing. But it was not one of these. No, I don't think I would have been allowed in the studio if I had had a cat shirt on. But during that interview, you know, I finally nailed him. He didn't want to have to answer this question, but I pushed him. I said, Tim, if you and I are standing outside an abortion clinic, someone comes up to us and says, what must I do to be saved? Will you honestly say right now that the answer you will give will be substantially different than the answer that I will give? And it took a while, but eventually said yes. And that's the fact. That's the reality. And so you can try it. It's people who emote rather than think. People operate on emotions will hear that and feel good about it. Oh, it feels so good. I feel warm and fuzzy now. But that's not really an answer. And it's not going to hold up over time. You cannot build a consistent biblical movement. Now, I'll be honest with you. For a lot of people today, it's not a matter of biblical movement. It's a matter of political movement. And once politics becomes your primary focus and your primary answer to the problems of the world, you're going to do everything differently. And the distinctives of the gospel found in the New Testament will have to be sacrificed. They will have to be turned into an optional element. Maybe down the road, for super Christians, that type of thing. Can't work that way. Another reason why I've said from the start, you can talk about a Christian nation, but it has to be Christian before it's a Christian nation. You have to have the gospel first. You have to have regeneration. You have to have the change. And when people reject that, there you go. So, back to Eric Mataxas, I don't understand the straw manning of the response to ECT. Maybe he just never bothered to listen. Maybe because he was a big fan of working with Chuck Colson. It's just the Calvinists. They're just out there and I've seen that happen over and over again. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen people, they'll tell me years later, well, I hated you because you were a part of this movement and you all believe such and so. And I'm like, but we never said anything like that. Well, that's what everybody in our movement thought you were saying, and so we just believed it. Happens all the time. So that could explain the misrepresentation, but it doesn't change the fact it was a misrepresentation. And someone needs to stand up and say to Mr. Mataxas, you need to start doing your homework a little better than you're doing it. Because that was an attack on Sproul, MacArthur, Kennedy, and all the rest of us that were actively involved in seeking to defend what evidently you all don't believe, and that is that the Reformation was the work of God. There's a lot of people today that don't believe that. There's a lot of people today believe the Reformation's over. That what it was focused upon isn't relevant any longer. I'm not one of them, and I don't think you should be either. But this is, I think, a very, very important issue, and this leads us to the reality that I was very concerned very shortly after Charlie Kirk's assassination by some of the stuff I started hearing. It's understandable. Someone who was in the public eye made all the statements, was on campuses. There's, I don't know how many tens of thousands of hours of video there is of Charlie Kirk speaking here, there, and everywhere. But I started, in the back of my mind, I'm going, man, I can see this going some bad directions. I could see people quoting Charlie Kirk to prove this, that, and the other thing, and Charlie Kirk shouldn't be being cited to prove anything, really, other than what Charlie Kirk actually believed. And then at the memorial, and my wife was there, my fellow elders were there, they all thought it was, pretty exciting. I'm only catching bits and pieces of it. I'm on the road. And what I'm seeing, where they're going, I just cannot believe that the gospel has been preached to the largest audience ever by, and then you start down the list, every different kind of theological perspective known. And so you've got Roman Catholics, and that was in 90 seconds. Man, he just laid out, that was great. And I guess I was the only person, the theological Debbie Downer, to go, those words have a particular meaning in his theological framework. You can listen when the Mormon missionaries come to your door. If one of the greatest reasons that Christians don't communicate with them well is because they don't know what their vocabulary means. They're using words in very specific and unique ways. We use the same words in a very different way. We're not communicating. So it sounds like they're saying what we believe, but they're not. When they talk about eternal life, they mean eternal lives. The ability to have children, procreate children, the spirit realm after you become a god. That ain't the same thing. And so you're just like, I've spent decades trying to explain to people, you have to learn to bridge the language barrier in talking to Mormons. Well, when Roman Catholics use terminology, now I realize today there is not as much of a monolithic position as there has been in the past. Vatican II has expanded things out. And I can hope that there are Roman Catholics that when they say these things, they've been so influenced by influences outside the Roman Catholic Church that they actually believe that. That would be wonderful. That would be great. But I can't just simply sit there and go, okay, this person is staying in communion with Rome. They're not stupid. the vice president is a convert to Roman Catholicism in 2019. And Scott Hahn is one of his best buds. Okay, so I know where Scott Hahn's coming from. And yeah, there are Roman Catholics that think Scott Hahn has tried to Presbyterianize Roman Catholicism. Okay, that's a whole nother topic. But you have to be super naive to simply go, hey, what I heard sounded great. Because, again, once you start asking questions, I've seen people saying, hey, I watched the Charlie Kirk Memorial. I'm going to read the Bible for the first time. I'm going to go to church on Sunday. Where should I go? Well, how are you going to answer that? What's the standard? By what standard is that to be judged? Oh, that gets to the sufficiency of Scripture or the insufficiency of Scripture as formally taught by the Roman Catholic Church, or the need for other Scripture as taught by the LDS Church. So you can put these questions off in the haze of emotion and joy, and we're all together. But we're not all together. Oh, we just need to put this stuff aside. We need to go with the moment. But what message are we proclaiming? When we talk about repentance, who gets to define what that is? Where do you find what? How do you answer that? So, forgive me for being the realist in the room, but it really seems like this push, again, can only go one direction. This push isn't meant to bring people out of Roman Catholicism and say, hey, look, here's the gospel. Here's what the gospel actually is. By minimizing the importance of justification by faith, by minimizing the importance of man's deadness and sin, that can only lead you one direction. That can't lead you into a biblical gospel of a finished work of Christ. That's going to lead you into something defined by tradition within Roman Catholicism, or these days Eastern Orthodoxy, whatever it might be. But it's not going to bring you to the biblical gospel. And that push for ecumenism is very much a part of Roman Catholic integralism, which is just simply, from the Roman Catholic perspective, if you go back and read the popes, which Roman Catholics don't do and Protestants don't do, but, read the papal syllabus of errors, that time period. And I say, it's all changed. Well, it can't change. It can evolve. It can be redefined. But the integralists tend to be traditionalists and very conservative. And they believe that the Church of Rome is absolutely necessary for the proper functioning of society. And they go back to the sacralism of the medieval period. Here's where it is. You Protestants messed all this stuff up, you see. So, most of the churches, ecumenically minded, yes, but most evangelical churches today do not have the theological and historical foundation to stand against this kind of onslaught. If a bunch of their people start going, hey, this is the movement we want to be involved with, they're going to go with it. Whether it means the sacrificing of key doctrinal elements for the greater good or whatever. That's how it goes. So, let me see, where'd I put that one? Maybe it's just something okay, there it is. It's not a, all right. So, that's point one, Roman Catholicism, ecumenical movement. When the attack on the Mormon ward in Michigan, just astonishing, the drone footage of the entire structure on fire. I'd never seen anything like that. I've never seen anything like that. I don't remember any church shooting, and it was even closer. I guess he planned all this, accelerants. Look, we don't know anything about the guy. I mean, there's been stuff about whether he had a shirt on, didn't have a shirt on that had Trump on it and all that. He was killed, wasn't he? Okay. So we may never know. I mean, does anybody out there know what the Las Vegas shooter was thinking? We have no earthly idea. And we're never going to know.
You say that, and it's the first thing my wife said. You know, we don't know. There's so much we don't know about these guys. And she pointed at the Las Vegas shooter, and they know nothing. Why did a guy who was a millionaire, as I understand it, from gambling, decide to go up there and do that? Evil?
Well, I'm not going to say nobody knows, but we're not going to be told. Well, we may find out someday. I don't know. But the point is, we don't know why he did what he did. The news comes out. I post on X, and all I said, and I knew it was a LDS Ward Chapel. All I said was horrific. Lord have mercy. That's all I said. I didn't say anything about Mormonism. I didn't say, y'all need to read my books on Mormonism, or anything like that. I just said, Lord have mercy. And then, it may have been a little more than 24 hours later, I think it was yesterday morning, a U.S. Senator, Lee from Utah, a lifelong Mormon, comes out and posts this. It looked like it was written by the church advertising department about how they're Christians and Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. I noticed they didn't say in the flesh, which they used to, because that's the only way it makes any sense in Mormonism. Jesus isn't the only begotten Son of God in Mormonism. He's the only begotten Son of God in Mormonism in the flesh. That is, he's the only person that God the Father in a physical body had begat with the Virgin Mary. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's what makes him the only begotten Father in the flesh, which is why he could then have immortal life, because his Father was immortal. Yeah, that's what it means. And there are lots of Mormons that don't know that anymore. This is what you need to understand. But anyways, hold on. So he comes out with this thing, this full-throated advertisement of Mormonism, and we're all supposed to just sit back and go, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Those of us who have stood for countless hours outside the General Conference in Salt Lake City, outside the Easter pageant in Mesa, outside Christmas lights in Mesa, and in so many other places, we're supposed to just sit there and go, because some wacko attacked a Mormon ward chapel. So we're supposed to just let this advertisement go on. No. And it was again, Eric Mataxas, who 2 days ago said, if you think now is the time to argue theological differences with the LDS community, your insensitivity to those mourning in the deaths of their loved ones betrays you as far from the heart of God. You should worry about that. It's a salvation issue. Wow. Mr. Mataxas is now adding to the gospel how far you are from the heart of God if you dare be discussing the simple fact of what I've said for decades. That is, Islam is closer to Christianity than Mormonism is. Oh, people don't like that. Oh, could defend it against anybody. Why? Because what is the most fundamental, foundational, definitional expression of religion? Whether it's monotheistic or polytheistic. You can't get more foundational than that. Islam and Christianity are monotheistic. One God, creator of all things. Joseph Smith, in the King Follett Funeral Discourse, delivered only a matter of weeks before his death, in 1844, said, we have imagined and supposed that God was God from all eternity. I will refute that idea and take away the veil so that you may see. Now, you notice I'm not reading anything. I'm looking directly into camera. Why? Because I've quoted that to thousands of Mormons in thousands of witnessing situations over decades. And I don't think Eric Mataxas ever has. Probably never read it. Probably doesn't even know where it came from. Probably wouldn't know where to find it. I just realized I completely forgot I was going to bring some books in. In fact, I was going to do it in the big studio, but we had a scheduling conflict, so you could see these books. But I was going to bring in the Journal of Discourses and the Documentary History of the Church. And the reality is, large portion of Mormons today do not know their own theology. And I can testify to this personally. When we started evangelizing the Mormons at the Easter pageant and then going up to Salt Lake City, the kids, the young kids, would come up to us and argue about exaltation to godhood. They knew what they believed. I'll never forget Elder Hollywood. That wasn't his actual name, but his badge actually said Elder Hollywood. Tall kid. And he got so angry with me at what we used to call Corner 1, Main and Hobson, that he lost control of himself. And he's towering over me. He's looking down at me. I'll never forget this because I'm looking up at him. And he's going, someday I'm going to be a god and you are going to worship me. Just that loud. There's people all around us. And I sort of glance over, and even the Mormons are like, he said the quiet part out loud. Really loud. And he sort of caught himself. He did apologize the next night. I do want to say that. But what he said is what he believed. Now, it is interesting. 10, 12 years later, I'm standing outside the temple in Salt Lake City. This guy comes walking up to me. He says, do you remember me? I started looking at him. You look familiar. Elder Hollywood? Oh, yeah. He wasn't a Mormon anymore. Not that he had been saved, but a lot of former missionaries burn out after that 2 years of pressure. For a while, they dropped it to 18 months, but then they went back 2 years. Anyways, so Mormonism is a polytheistic religion. Mormonism is the most polytheistic religion I know of amongst mankind. Mormonism believes that there are an unlimited number of deities. Not in the universe, but in the universes, plural. So the number of gods increases every day. And so that makes the Hindus look like amateurs as far as the number of deities is concerned. That's the most foundational, fundamental metric of a religion. You're either monotheistic, one God, or polytheistic. And they're polytheistic. And so everything else needs to be understood in light of that. From their perspective, God, men, and angels are all the same being. They're just at different levels of exaltation. Within Mormonism, and there are some Mormons that question this part, but intelligences existed eternally, and we were all intelligences. Whether you're God, men, angels, you're all intelligence, so we were all equal at that point in time. There are some Mormons that don't believe that, and there's a simple reason for this. Joseph Smith's theology evolved and changed radically after the founding of the church, April 6, 1830. When you read the Book of Mormon, he's trying to be a Trinitarian. He doesn't understand the Trinity. He's a modalist. A lot of evangelicals are modalists and don't realize it. And they've tried to fix some of that by changing the Book of Mormon, editing it over the years. But you don't find in the Book of Mormon the King Follett funeral discourse, as I mentioned earlier. And by the way, I don't know if anybody looked it up, but we did a whole series. I don't even know what year this when was Romney running? 2012? Let's see. Okay, so 2012. When did the Arizona senator run? Was that 2008? Okay, so Romney ran in 2012, and that caused everybody to start talking about Mormonism. And so we did a whole series, I would assume during the summer of 2012, on Mormonism. What Mormonism teaches, its canon of scripture, temples, priesthoods, Book of Mormon, ancient, medieval, mid-American, Central American archaeology in the Book of Mormon, false prophecies of Joseph Smith and the Doctrine and Covenants, the Book of Abraham. Oh my goodness. Covered the whole gamut. And I don't know if anybody looked up those programs with our Let's Church capabilities now. It should be able to pull those up. I don't know if you can put a date range in there and limit it to that.
There are a number of posts here from 2007 and 8, a series that you did called Mormonism 101. So there's a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot.
Why would that have been 7 and 8?
I don't know. Was 12 the second round for him? Because I would think I recall McCain running in 8 and in 12. And
I remember
Romney being against him there as well, but
I know it was Romney's running.
I have slept since then.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I know it was Romney's running that prompted it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll just have to ask Algo. When all else fails, ask Algo. And if we can get a link or something that we could put, maybe I can stick it in the show thing on the blog. Something like that. I don't have time. Mormonism is such a huge topic. There are so many, from the Mountain Meadows Massacre to Mesoamerican archaeology to Egyptology. Yeah, the Book of Abraham. There's just, when I first started studying it, there were times I just sit back. I was 19 years old. I just sit back and go, how am I ever going to remember all this stuff? I didn't have anybody to provide guidance. I hadn't found the Tanners yet. But even when I did, still, you start reading Mormonism Shadow Reality. It's like, whoa, it's huge. Wide area. And I've said many times, the difference between Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. Mormonism is huge, but you don't need to know it overly in depth, every single area. Jehovah's Witnesses is very narrow, but you need to know it very much in depth. So it's sort of like taking Mormonism, turning it this way. Narrow, but you need to know it really in depth. And no way to be doing all that on Mormonism, especially since I have written 2 books on the subject. Letters to a Mormon Elder, which covers the broad spectrum. And then the more focused book is The Mormon, My Brother, which is focused specifically on the subject. Where'd it go? There it is. Specifically on the subject of the LDS doctrine of God. And then one of the things that came up on X was I made reference to chapter 12 of Is the Mormon My Brother? And I need to differentiate between Is the Mormon My Brother and the book that Chris Arnzen made reference to, the book that I'm supposed to write about him, called Is This Moron My Brother? He did that at the beginning of a debate. But in chapter 12, A Mormon Doctrine or Mere Speculation. And this was the teaching that God the Father, who in Mormonism has a body of flesh and bones, no blood, because flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. But God the Father, tangible body, flesh and bones, has as many wives. He begets spirit children in the spiritual preexistence. But when it comes time for Jesus, his Jehovah, his firstborn spirit child, to enter into human flesh, Elohim in a physical body begets his body in a sexual act with the Virgin Mary, which means she's not the Virgin Mary anymore. And I made reference to this, and I posted the graphic that, let me see if I can open image in new tab.
So while you're looking for that,
No, I've got it right here.
no, I was going to say the series was actually 07. He ran in 07 and 8, and then ran again in 12.
Oh,
And so the whole series you did was in 2007 and some in 8.
okay, good. Well, maybe we can put together a.
Well, you call it Mormonism 101, so it's easy to find.
Okay, all right. Well, here is. I thought this graphic was in the book, but this graphic is from a 1972 or 74, a family home evening manual for Mormons. In talking about this, this is back in the 70s where they weren't nearly as embarrassed about things. Daddy plus mommy means you. Our Heavenly Father plus Mary means Jesus. Do we have to get any more basic than this? I mean, I provided quote after quote after quote after quote after quote documenting this. Look, you need to understand, most Mormons today don't know this. But I do like telling the story. You can take that down. I do like telling the story of how, wow, I shut down Twitter in the process. I love telling the story of how on the West Gate, now the West Gate, there are 4 gates to Temple Square. There's actually many ways to get in Temple Square. The other require you be high up in the church and use all the many tunnels and all the rest of that kind of fun stuff. Anyway, if you're going to get onto Temple Square, this was before they built the meeting house across the way and got rid of us, basically. But most people who were going to attend the tabernacle and attend the general conference, they had to walk past us. So we would put people at the North Gate, the South Gate, and the West Gate. The quiet gate was the West Gate. The South Gate would be crazy at lunch because all the food places were across the street. And North Gate would be busy pretty much the whole day, especially because once you lined up the missionaries, they'd come through the North Gate into the tabernacle. Anyway, I met a demonized guy at the North Gate once. Didn't have a shirt on, had a knife. That was interesting. But the West Gate, different. It was earlier in the morning, before the first session. It's cold. This tall Mormon comes striding across the road, and he's just going to blow right by us. But hey, I was trained by Wally Tope, so I walked with him, got the tract right in front of him. He couldn't ignore me because I'm moving with him. He takes it, he stops, he flips it over, looks at the back, turns around, and he looks at all of us. And there were probably, 4 of us there. And he goes, "You know what's wrong with you?" We've heard that a few times. You normally don't have to come up with a response. They're going to continue on whatever you say. He says, "You know what's wrong with you?" He says, "You don't believe that Elohim in a physical body begat the body of Jesus Christ with the Virgin Mary. That's why you're wrong. That's why this is the true church. Have a nice day." Wheeled around, walked in. And I was left speechless, which is rare for me. But I was left speechless. Mainly by his honesty. As I knew that's what they believed. Now, would that happen today? I suppose it could. Are there fewer Mormons today that have read enough of their history to know that this is what only begotten in the flesh means? Yeah, there's fewer. Could Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, be one of those people? I suppose. I mean, I would sort of guess that if you're a United States senator from Utah, you might know something about your theology, but I could be wrong. Maybe that's why he didn't say only begotten of the Father in the flesh. But if you know these things, you can't just sit there and go, yeah, this would not be the proper time to point out that what he's saying is not what Christians believe by any stretch of the imagination. We could talk about blood atonement. We could talk about all sorts of issues that would demonstrate the vast chasm that separates the official teachings of Mormonism, which I understand in our day are being minimized. I get it. Mormonism's changing. But they haven't come out and said, you know what? All that polytheism stuff, Joseph Smith, we're not going to do that anymore. They haven't done that. What they're doing is recontextualizing. I am astonished at how many Mormons I've run into just over the past couple of years that are willing to completely redefine what it means to be a prophet so that Joseph Smith can fit into it. You know, back when we first started doing this, there's a 3-volume set of books, I can see the slipcovers, by Joseph Fielding Smith called Doctrines of Salvation. And in that series, Joseph Fielding Smith, who was a prophet of the Mormon Church, said Joseph Smith was either properly called and divinely ordained, or he was one of the biggest frauds this world has ever seen. There is no middle ground. That's not a direct quote. That's just a sort of a paraphrase. But his point was, he was either called of God as a prophet, or he was the biggest fraud the world's ever seen. There is no middle ground. Well, there is a lot of middle ground in Mormonism now. And I can tell you the reasons for this. I can tell you when Mormonism decided to go mainstream and sent their best and brightest from BYU out to go get their PhDs from Ivy League schools and then bring them back to teach, they brought critical theory back with them. And they injected it into the mainstream of the Mormon church. The problem is Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon cannot withstand critical theory. So you've got a mutant developing right now. And it takes time. It really does. But it's happening. And what's Mormonism going to look like 10 years from now? 20 years from now? I don't know. But life in Utah right now is weird. It's strange. Because you see this, you've got this mixture of old-time Mormons who still believe that Brigham Young was a prophet of God. And you got new-time Mormons that sort of know the church has thrown Brigham Young under the bus, especially because of his racial comments, saying that, the priesthood can never be given to the blacks and things like that. So you've got this strange mixture. Back in the late 1980s, I could pretty much know what someone believed who walked up to me out in Mesa, who said, I'm Mormon. Now you got to let them talk for a while to find out. I've told you the story a couple of years ago at the Easter pageant. I'm talking with this Mormon. There's a small group around us. And he says, I just don't understand why you folks are out here. We're Christians. We accept your baptism. You should accept our baptism. And I remember sort of glancing over at an older Mormon standing next to him, who's sort of also glancing over at him like, who's going to tell him? And when that guy left, I started talking with the older guy, and I said, so, y'all aren't teaching your theology real clear these days? And he's sort of like, yeah, he wasn't right about that. Because they don't accept our baptism. They can't. There is no valid baptism without holding the priesthood in Mormon theology, and the priesthood is held only in the Mormon church, Aaronic and Melchizedek priesthoods. So, yes, there are Mormons today. Mormonism has always been extremely subjective. The Mormon testimony, Moroni chapter 10, pray about these things, get the testimony of the Holy Spirit, la 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 la. That subjectivism is the primary reason why you have LGBTQ plus groups on BYU's campus today. Because if your testimony of the church is subjective, then it's primarily emotional. And you can find lots of reasons to emotionally embrace the sexual revolution and everything else. So, yes, talking to Mormons today can be much more of a challenge than it was. It was a lot easier when everybody knew what they believed. But when Mike Lee comes out and starts using... Now, you might say, he's just responding to people who are saying they weren't Christians. We've said that from the beginning. This is a given. What major Christian denomination that has any level of orthodoxy has ever embraced Mormonism as a fellow Christian denomination? There's always been these movements, the guy from Fuller, Richard Mao, and all that silly stuff that they've tried to. But anybody who takes the time to honestly read their own sources, and most Mormons don't do that anymore. Pick up a single volume, Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith by Joseph Fielding Smith. All he's doing is drawing Smith's most famous statements and sermons and stuff like that, the documentary history of the church, primarily, times and seasons, things like that, and put into one volume for you. Read it for yourself. Not only can you see the evolution, he starts off as a monotheist, becomes a polytheist. You can see the evolution, but when the founder of a religion says, we have imagined and supposed that God was God from all eternity, I will refute that idea and take away the veil so that you may see, that person has separated his followers from biblical Christianity forever. Your only choice is to repudiate him if you want to follow Christ. But this is a religion that teaches that God, men, and angels are all the same being, just at different levels of exaltation. And can we go into that? Yeah, forever. For hours and hours and hours. The documentation is complete. There isn't any question about this. The only question you get is from Mormons who haven't done their own homework, haven't done nearly as much reading in this subject as the rest of us have, and as their older Mormons have. And evidently, they're not talking about it the way they should be talking about it. So, this is not, I agree. You don't take the shooting as the foundation of, hey, let's go get the Mormons now. And I didn't. But when the Mormons come out and want to play the victim, and in fact, Lee, I thought I saved that. I did save that, but unfortunately, it was, I think, on my phone. Maybe it's in my photos. Let me see here. Yeah, here it is. We found it. Oh, there it is in that too. I think this was today. Mike Lee on X said, they hated Latter-day Saints and drove us from Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois because we were heretics. In the eyes of many, we still are. I don't care, but I'd like for the killing to stop. Oh, let's play the victim card now. For example, Joseph Smith was murdered. And his murder was wrong. But he was not a martyr. Martyrs don't shoot back. And Joseph Smith was shooting back. And if you know anything about Mormon history, then you might want to know something about the Danites. You might want to know something about Mountain Meadows Massacre. You might want to know a little something about David W. Patton, all the battles that they had. Maybe know something about the early temple ceremonies. These are facts. that many of us know. But man, most people on X don't. And had a friend point out, watching some of this stuff going on, the evangelical witness to Mormons is primarily being done by people who think they're Trinitarians and are actually modalists. They aren't representing historical biblical Christianity accurately at all. They don't know what they're talking about. They're basically doing, it's sad, okay? They're not using sound information and sound argumentation. Then again, X doesn't really reward that a whole lot either. So that's what's going on. But you can't, what he said Lee ignored the fact that so much of that driving of the saints from those places was due to polygamy, failed banks and banking schemes by Joseph Smith, and the very fact that there was literally running military battles between the Mormons and others. They weren't your best neighbors, especially when Joseph Smith is marrying 30 different women. And then they're running around proclaiming that they'll get to have your wives in the future. That didn't make for good relationships. That's why they're going someplace far, far away called Utah. So, I mean, pulling the victim card and then using this as a means to, promote Mormonism, I'm sorry. Got to respond to that. It's has nothing to do with some wacko in Michigan. But if you're going to put that out there and say, this is the truth, and it's not the truth, and very obviously, sadly, a lot of people don't have any idea what Mormonism actually teaches. None. And therefore, they're not in a good position to respond to this stuff. Was there something you wish to say, sir?
I did. Senator Lee's testimony, at least was original. But the one thing that stood out to me of when I first encountered it was his claim that he worships Jesus.
Yeah.
And it immediately hit me, wait a minute. Now, I looked this up. Mike Lee was born in 1971. So when Bruce R. McConkie wrote to the students at BYU, that was in the early 80s, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to say he was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old at the time. Let's say he was old enough to get the Aaronic priesthood. Somewhere in there. But that was rebuked by McConkie because this was the craze at BYU to pray to Jesus. And you can't pray to Jesus because we only have one God for this planet, and that's Elohim, even though we believe that Jesus is a God and so's the Holy Ghost, and he doesn't have a body of flesh and bone. We don't know why. But that kind of stuff, it's like, wait a minute. If you put that stuff out there in this environment, you're taking as much advantage of it as those you're accusing. And we remained quiet until we see this. And it's like, but that's got to be answered. You can't just expect to have a monologue here, guys. You don't suddenly have the floor because you've gone through this.
No, the victim card gives you the floor.
But it has to be answered.
And that's what, look, I'm not saying most of the answers have been very good on X. There's not a lot. If you don't know Mormon theology, don't pretend like you do. But still, responding in love is necessary. And we just did, just as we did in regards to the Roman Catholic situation. And so there you go. All right, we went 21 minutes long there. The world's not going to end for that. But hopefully that is helpful to you. Since this is an ongoing conversation, if more stuff comes up in regards to the Father is the literal Father of Jesus stuff. Hey, I've got those files. We can put them all on the screen. We can walk through the quotations. Problem is, one of the primary sources of those quotes was Bruce R. McConkie. And Bruce R. McConkie has pretty much been discredited. I mean, it's astonishing to see that. You know, I gave a tract to Bruce R. McConkie once outside the south gate of the Mormon Temple. He was feared as one of the 12 apostles. And he died, 80 something. It's been a while now. And I still am shocked when I walked into the LDS bookstore in Salt Lake City. 85, yeah. So it's been 40 years. And there's almost nothing by McConkie in there. You can't find Mormon doctrine. Promised Messiah, I didn't see that. What? Well, yeah, you can't find most Mormon theology in the LDS bookstore either. But books that were just so common in the mid-'80s, which is when we started our ministry to Mormons, just gone. And look, if he was an apostle of Jesus Christ, you can't disappear an apostle. That just gives you a clear example of how ultimate sources of authority work and how they can claim this is what was delivered by God from heaven, and then they can edit and change and stuff like that as time goes by. So there you go. Okay, thanks for watching the program today. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Lord willing, we'll be back again on Thursday. We'll see you then. God bless.